Curious to know if Benjamin Sesko is going to be the right signing for Manchester United? I can show you one player, 6 comparisons in 6 images. Hi, I'm Wayne and welcome to Goals by the Numbers. Let's just get straight into it. So, Manchester United have announced yet another signing. This time it's Benjamin Sesko, or Sesko, depending on how accurate it'll be with the pronunciation. He's joined the club for a reported 73.3 million, or in around the 73 million pound mark. He has come from RB Leipzig, who play in the Bundesliga. And ultimately the question will be, is he going to be the player who's going to get Manchester United enough goals to get them further up the league? After finishing 15th, which is the worst finish Manchester United have had in the Premier League, this season, they surely must be looking to climb the league and hopefully qualify for a European place at the absolute minimum. So, who is Benjamin Sesko? He is a player who has gone through a couple of the RB group teams, which is why he's known to Christopher Vavell, who's part of the Manchester United backroom staff. He is an absolute unit, being 6'5", 6'6", and joining a team which is relatively on the small end. He will be a welcome addition, especially at set pieces. Because at this point, I fear it's just Harry Maguire who's the only player who is really, really useful in the air. So, Sesko joins as a striker. Last season, Manchester United had problems in that role because they only really had Rasmus Højlund. Xerxes, who was also signed to compete with Højlund as a striker, ends up moving back into midfield as in one of the number 10 roles. And Obi, or Chido Obi, he was signed from Arsenal as a young player, and at 16 years old was never really old enough to be a viable option. Plus, he also wasn't registered in the Europa League, so he couldn't even play those games. So at this point, we'll have to look and see how Sesko is going to settle in. The first match, which will be next week against Arsenal, will be a curious watch because Sesko was a target for Arsenal for a while. There are various reports saying that he was Mikel Arteta's preference. Arsenal ended up signing Victor Gyökeres, which statistically, because we are about the numbers, is a good signing from Sporting Club Portugal. But Gyökeres made his name at Sporting Club Portugal playing under a certain Ruben Amorim. So we've ended up in a scenario where, similar to, I want to say 5-6 years ago, Lukaku and Morata were linked to Manchester United and Chelsea. And Manchester United were linked to Morata and ended up signing Lukaku, and Morata ended up at Chelsea. So we ended up with another situation where 2 strikers have been linked strongly with 2 clubs and have ended up at their opposite. So let's get into the numbers. So in terms of standout statistics, Sesko doesn't really have numbers that are actually, really big standout ones. So there are 4 that come to mind, which are all above the 70th percentile. Those being the amount of aerials won, the amount of passes attempted, so not completed, progressive carries, and successful take-ons. So what does this tell us? A player who tends to win the ball in the air a lot, but he is exceedingly tall. A player who carries the ball forward or just dribbles, to keep it simple, and also successful at dribbling too. Now, in terms of the successful take-on, which is the highest metric, so in the 89th percentile, his per 90 value is 1.33. Now, if we compare that to the player with the highest per 90 for take-ons over the past season, that is Lamine Yamal, who comes in at 4.94. Now, Sesko is a striker. Yamal is a winger. Now, why could Sesko why could his metrics be, ordinary? So, I guess the easiest way to explain that would be RB Leipzig finished 7th last season, which is several places below where they would have expected to finish. So no European football for them this coming season. And at times, Sesko did actually play in midfield and in a number 10 position. Why? Leipzig weren't doing well and they needed to try a few different things. So the first place to look at Sesko would be to compare him against the current incumbent for the starting striker at Manchester United, which is Rasmus Højlund. So last season, Rasmus Højlund at times looked as if, I guess, he wanted the ground to open up and just swallow him. It was a thankless task being up front for Manchester United alone. There was no respite apart from just being injured and not being able to be selected. So statistically, goals, Sesko scored 13 just in the league. Rasmus scored 4. So yes, neither have a high score. But in terms of XG, expected goals, Sesko beat his expected goals by 3. Højlund was below his expected goals by 1.3. So immediately we now start to see a bit of a divergence in the output. Shot on target percentage. Sesko was a tad under 44%, whereas Rasmus Højlund was just above 40%. Again, the gap starts to widen. So goals per shot, Sesko came in at 0.17 and Rasmus came in at 0.13. Okay, relatively close numbers. It's not too bad. But in terms of the distance that both players tended to shoot from, Rasmus's was 12.9 yards. Sesko's was 17.5. Now you think, why is he shooting so far if he's the main striker? Could be for several reasons. One, he's playing against a team who is playing against defenders who are defending really deep, so there's a lack of space. Absolutely fine. But when you actually watch Sesko play football, when he shoots as if he is trying to get the ball out of the stadium by kicking it through the goal and through the actual seats. He literally hits the ball like it owes him money and it's done something bad to him personally. Not that Højlund doesn't hit the ball or strike the ball with a lot of power. Sesko just seems to really, really go for it with shots. And I think it's going to catch a few people and goalkeepers out this season. So other metrics are interesting when comparing the two players. So as you touched on before, Sesko attempts a lot of passes. So in terms of progressive passes, he made 46 compared to Højlund's 18. So again, the main striker is passing the ball a lot. He hits the ball hard. He's beating his XG. This starts to sound like a player who potentially can not only score goals, carry the ball forward in times of, say, a counter-attack or what we now call a transition, but also pass the ball to other players so that they are able to fashion a chance, which takes us quite nicely on to two other stats. Shot creating action per 90, where Sesko beats Højlund 1.93 to 1.53, and goal creating actions per 90, where Sesko gets 0.34 and Højlund gets 0.04. So Sesko is passing the ball to a player, shot creating action, who passes the ball to a player who has a shot, or passing the ball to a player who has a shot with the potential to score a goal. So a striker who not only scores or beats his XG, but also aids other players in trying to have a shot, that's going to go down very well. Which takes us on to, I guess, the next thought we would have, which would be a comparison of the top scorers in the Premier League from last season. So removing Bryan Mbeumo because he's now joined Manchester United, and the assumption will be that as Brentford's top goal scorer and the fact that he took penalties, he's unlikely to score the exact same amount of numbers simply because Bruno Fernandes is the primary penalty taker, so he loses those penalties, which I believe was 5. Yeah, 5. So that leaves us with a list of Salah, Isaac, Haaland, and Chris Wood. And just also to keep it a bit interesting, I've added an average of all of those players, not including Sesko, so we can kind of get a gauge of where he is directly compared to some players and also compared to the average. So, first things first, as we know, Sesko beat his XG by 3. In that score, he's in good company because Isaac came in at 2.7, Chris Wood got the most at 6.6, and the average was 3.3. In terms of shot on target percentage, Sesko actually beat Mohamed Salah, who came in at 41.3. So if the two of them have the same amount of shots, Sesko's technically, or at least theoretically, more likely to get more on target. In terms of actual shots on target per 90, the average among the highest goal scorers last season was 1.4. Sesko comes in at 1.1, so he's below average in terms of actual shots on target. Now, in terms of goals scored per shot, Sesko and Mohamed Salah both have 0.17. So in terms of actual goals scored, if the two of them have the same amount of shots, there's a case that they are likely to score the same amount of goals. Added to this, Erling Haaland only scores 0.18, so he's very close to this group, with the average being 0.2, so they're actually all below average, interestingly. When we think of other statistics which are interesting among the group, one that stuck out to me was progressive passes. So Mohamed Salah, as we know, had a ton of assists last season, which might explain why he had 144, which dragged up the average among the other top goal scorers. But Chris Wood with 42 and Sesko with 46 coming again quite close. Not as high as the average of 73.5, but reasonably close. Now that takes us on to the final set of statistics that will be interesting to look at. The shot creating actions per 90 and the goal creating actions per 90. So again, we know what Sesko had with 1.93 and 0.34. But Chris Wood, who also came in at 1.34, which was below the average of 2.8, had a similar score. And in terms of goal creating actions, Sesko had 0.34 and Erling Haaland had 0.3. So ultimately, statistically, he is in and around the top scorers from last season. Does that mean he's going to have the same output? We don't know. We have to see how he performs. However, looking at the numbers, he does make sense in terms of a prospective signing. If he were to actually repeat the numbers from last season and score just 13 goals, he would triple the output of Rasmus Højlund, which when you think about it, 13 goals for Manchester United would never be enough. When you think of the history and the money and the budgets and the size of the stadium alone. But when you come in 15th, you need someone to score goals. And if he repeats the same numbers of 13, and then you add that to Mbeumo getting 13 and Cunha also getting 13, all of a sudden now, Manchester United have added a lot of goals to their forward line. And that alone should take them up the table. Because the defence wasn't that bad. Just the attack was absolutely... It wasn't sufficient. Let's say that. It wasn't sufficient. So, with the numbers in mind, the transfer fee, is Sesko value for money? Simple answer, yes. Of course, you'd always want to spend less money on a player, but looking at the numbers, comparing him to the top scorers from last season, he's in and around the numbers, so he's close. And then comparing him directly to Rasmus Højlund, who started up front for Manchester United as the main striker, he beats him in almost every metric. So he is an upgrade. And I think the question will be, how does he settle? How does he score? And how does he fit into the team? So bringing other players into this equation, I think one thing to look out for will be the amount of crosses that Manchester United will get into the box, especially from Bryan Mbeumo, who I would expect to, in some circumstances, when there isn't space to run into, pull wide, as he can also play as a winger, and look to cross balls in, probably towards the back post, and that would be where you might see Sesko running in and trying to apply that absolutely mountainous height he has to try and get on the end of things. And as we know statistically, aerially he does do okay. So, next match for Manchester United is against Arsenal. In their last friendly at Old Trafford against Fiorentina, Højlund did not start or get any minutes on the pitch. Sesko is officially a Manchester United player. I guess the question is at this point is, will he start? Time will tell, but I think the time next week when the next video comes out and we review some of the matches from the weekend, we will definitely be talking about that first match at Old Trafford. Manchester United versus Arsenal should be a cracker. Anyway, questions, comments, opinions, concerns down below. I'll catch you in the next one.